Stop. Before you decide it's over. Before you convince yourself that window has closed and she's moved on and whatever was there is gone. I need you to hear something. The conversation you had with yourself the night you thought you lost her. The one where you replayed every moment and decided you read it wrong, that she wasn't interested, that you waited too long or said the wrong thing at the wrong time. That conversation was not a verdict. That was fear talking. And fear is the worst interpreter of female behavior that has ever existed. What I'm about to share with you has changed the way hundreds of men see women they thought were lost to them. Not because it gives them magic lines or manipulation tactics, but because it gives them something far more powerful, the ability to actually read what's in front of them. And what most men miss, genuinely, completely miss, is that a woman who has gone quiet is not always a woman who has walked away. Sometimes she is a woman who is waiting for you to finally see what she's been showing you for months. There are specific signs, behavioral patterns, things she does, often unconsciously, that tell you the connection is still alive, still warm, still possible. And I'm going to walk you through them today, one by one, with the psychology behind each one. Because understanding why she does these things is just as important as recognizing them when they happen. But first, I need you to understand the single biggest mistake men make in this situation. Because if you don't clear this out first, the rest of what I'm about to share won't land the way it needs to. The mistake is this: you're using the wrong measuring system. Men tend to measure interest in direct, linear ways. She said yes. She called. She smiled. She made it obvious. When those signals are present, you feel confident. When they disappear, you assume interest has disappeared with them. But female attraction doesn't work in straight lines. It never has. The research from the University of Texas on long-term mate selection shows consistently that women's expressions of interest become more subtle, not less, as their actual feelings deepen. The women who are most drawn in are often the ones who pull back the most visibly, because the vulnerability of genuine attraction triggers protective behavior. She doesn't go cold because she stopped feeling something. She goes quiet because she started feeling too much. That one distinction, when you really absorb it, changes everything you think you know about where you stand. Quick pause here, because I want to make sure you have everything you need, not just what fits into a single video. There's a guide I put together that goes much deeper into the psychology behind what we're covering today. It's called The Psychology of Women Men Never Forget. Link is in the first comment. If you're serious about understanding this, it's the next step. Let's keep going. Now, the signs. And I want you to pay attention here not just with your mind, but with your memory. Because I'd be willing to bet that more than one of these is something you've already seen from her. And dismissed. The first sign is what I call the maintenance signal. Picture this. It's been 2 weeks, maybe 3. You haven't spoken the way you used to. The daily check-ins have stopped. You've started to assume the silence means she's moved on. And then she sends you something. It's small, a meme she thought you'd find funny, an article about something you mentioned once in passing, a comment on a photo from months ago, something that, if you described it to a friend, they'd say, "That's nothing." But here's what it actually is. Maintaining a connection requires intention. When someone is truly indifferent to you, they don't send you anything. They don't think of you. They don't encounter something in their day and instinctively think of routing it to you. The fact that she's doing that, even sporadically, even with something that looks trivial on the surface, means you are still present in her internal world. She's filing you under person I want to stay connected to, and she's making small deposits into that connection, even when she's not ready to make big ones. Dr. John Gottman's research on relationship repair consistently identifies these small acts of reaching out as what he calls bids for connection. They're low-risk attempts to test whether the door is still open. She's not asking you to dinner. She's checking if the light is still on. If you've been dismissing these as meaningless small talk, you have been misreading her maintenance signal as indifference. And the difference between those two readings may be the difference between where you are now and where you want to be. The instruction here is not complicated. Respond warmly. Not desperately. Not immediately with a 5-paragraph explanation of your feelings. With warmth. With interest. Let her know the light is on. When a woman sends you something small, she is not making conversation. She is keeping the door from closing all the way. The second sign is the memory mirror. You know what hits me about this? Most men watching this right now have already experienced every single sign we're discussing. They just didn't have a name for it. And when you don't have a name for something, you can't respond to it. That's exactly why I created a guide that names everything. Every signal. Every pattern. Every moment most men misread. It's pinned in the first comment. Read it once and I promise you'll start seeing things you've been walking past your entire life. The memory mirror is this. She remembers things you told her. Not big things, not your job or your name, those are too obvious. Small things. A preference you mentioned once. A detail from a story you told 6 weeks ago. Something you said you wanted to try someday. And she brings it up. Casually. As if it just occurred to her. As if she's not aware of what it reveals. What it reveals is that she has been paying attention. Not politely, the way you do with someone you're just being courteous to, but attentively. The way you pay attention to people you're quietly invested in. Thomas, 61, came to me convinced that a woman he had known for 4 months was simply being friendly. He listed the evidence of her friendliness. She always asked how he was doing. She remembered his daughter's name. She knew which coffee he ordered. That's just being nice, he told me. I asked him how many other people in that environment knew which coffee he ordered. He paused. None, he said. But she works there. I asked him if she asked the other regulars about their daughters. Another pause. The memory mirror doesn't care about context. It cares about selective attention. She chose to hold on to those details. That is not friendliness. That is investment. Neurobiological studies on attention and emotional encoding show that humans retain detailed information most reliably about things they have emotional responses to. When she remembers something minor that you said, she's not telling you about her memory. She's telling you about her feelings. The instruction: give her more to remember, not with a monologue, with the kind of details that are specific to who you are, not generic facts, real pieces of yourself. She doesn't hold on to things you said because she has a good memory. She holds on to them because she has feelings she hasn't said out loud yet. The third sign is the protective redirect. Stay with me here, because this is the one that surprises men the most. This is the sign that looks most like rejection, and isn't. You're in a conversation. It's going well. You feel the current. And then suddenly she deflects. She changes the subject. She brings up something neutral, or she introduces a third party into the dynamic, or she becomes visibly less available than she was 30 seconds ago. And you read that as a wall. You read it as, she's shutting this down. Here's what's actually happening, according to research on emotional defense mechanisms in early-stage attachment. When a woman who is genuinely attracted to someone begins to feel that the intensity is rising faster than her sense of safety, she will instinctively create distance to regulate her own emotional response. The higher the attraction, the more powerful this impulse can be. It is not indifference. It is the opposite of indifference dressed in indifference's clothes. The women who go completely cold on you after a charged moment. Those are often the women who felt the most. They protected themselves from a vulnerability they weren't ready for. If she were truly uninterested, there would be nothing to regulate. You wouldn't generate enough heat in her system to require management. The critical piece here, and I cannot overstate this, is timing. A woman using the protective redirect is not saying never. She is saying not yet. The man who pushes through that moment and demands the intensity return will lose her. The man who accepts the redirect with ease, who doesn't need her to stay in that vulnerable zone, who is secure enough to let the moment pass without making it mean something catastrophic. That man becomes more attractive, not less, in the moment of seeming retreat. Robert, 57, described a woman who had kissed him at an event and then spent the next 3 weeks acting as if it hadn't happened. He was certain he had misread the situation. He was wrong. She had panicked. She had backed away from something that felt too real. The man who gave her room to return, who didn't demand an explanation, who let her reapproach on her own timeline, that man is the one who wins. The instruction: when she redirects, follow her lead. Let the moment go. Hold your own center. Watch what happens in the days that follow. The protective redirect is not a door closing. It is a door that opened too fast and swung back. Leave it ajar and she will open it herself. The fourth sign is the most misread of all. I call it selective availability. Dating after 50 isn't about pretending to be younger. It's about showing up with everything you've actually become. The clarity, the groundedness, the ability to give and receive love without losing yourself in it. I wrote a guide specifically for men navigating love and connection at this stage. It's called Second Chapter. The link is pinned in the first comment. If this is where you are, that book was written for you. Selective availability works like this. She's busy. She's always busy. She has a life, obligations, things that fill her calendar. And yet, when you are involved, her availability shifts. She finds the time. The meeting she said she couldn't reschedule somehow gets moved. The plans she said were fixed develop a flexibility they didn't have when you weren't part of the equation. You have to pay attention to the pattern, not the individual instance. One cancellation means nothing. A woman who consistently creates space for you while simultaneously being unavailable to almost everything else is showing you something she cannot say directly. She is telling you that you are a priority by making you one. The science behind this is rooted in what attachment researchers call proximity seeking, the behavioral drive to be physically or socially near someone who has become emotionally significant. It operates largely below the level of conscious decision-making. She doesn't plan to rearrange her schedule around you. She just keeps finding that her schedule has been rearranged. That's not coincidence. That's her nervous system navigating toward connection. The practical instruction: pay attention to what happens to her time when you are in the picture versus when you are not. The ratio tells you more than anything she says. The calendar doesn't lie. When she makes room, she's telling you something she can't yet say out loud, something small before we continue. This channel survives on the generosity of viewers who find something worth keeping here. If today's video is one of those moments for you, there's a voluntary support link in the first comment. Think of it as buying the channel a coffee. No subscription, no commitment, just appreciation, if and when you feel it. Now back to what we were discussing. The fifth sign, and I need you to stay with me here because this one cuts the deepest, is what I call the emotional disclosure ladder. She tells you things, not everything, not the big, obvious, vulnerable things you'd notice immediately. She starts small, a frustration at work, a memory from her past, a small fear, a family dynamic she doesn't discuss freely, and she watches your response. Closely, carefully, probably in ways you're not aware of. And if your response is the right one, not the perfect response, not the romantic response, but the present, non-judgmental, genuinely interested response, she tells you something slightly bigger. This is the emotional disclosure ladder. Each rung is a test of emotional safety. She is not testing you consciously. She is doing what human beings do when they are considering letting someone in. She is putting a small piece of herself in your hands and watching what you do with it. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology on self-disclosure and intimacy development demonstrates that reciprocal, escalating disclosure is the single most reliable predictor of deepening emotional connection. And that women in particular use disclosure patterns to assess whether a potential partner can hold complexity without judgment. If she has been telling you things she hasn't told others, details from her past, fears about the future, things that make her feel exposed. She is not making conversation. She is building a case for trusting you. The instruction here is not about what to say when she discloses. It's about what not to do. Don't fix it. Don't minimize it. Don't jump to a solution that shows you weren't really listening. Be present. Reflect it back. Show her that what she gave you didn't land in empty space. Because if she has been on this ladder with you, even for a few rungs, you are not a person she's indifferent to. You are a person she is quietly, carefully, deliberately deciding about. When a woman tells you something she doesn't tell people freely, she is not making an exception. She is making a decision. The sixth sign is what I call the witness effect. You're in a group, a dinner, a social event, a gathering of people. She's engaged with the room, talking, laughing, present. And then, with a frequency you'd notice if you were paying attention, her eyes find you, not because she needs something from you, not because you're the loudest person in the room. She just looks, checks. For a second that seems to last slightly longer than it should. Her gaze lands on you before returning to the conversation she was in. This is the witness effect. She wants you to be a witness to her experience. She wants to know you're watching, not in a surveillance way, but in a this matters more because you're here way. It's a form of shared experience seeking, the impulse to include another person in your internal life, even when the external context doesn't require it. Research by Dr. Arthur Aaron on self-expansion theory identifies this impulse, wanting your important experiences witnessed by a specific person, as one of the earliest and most reliable markers of romantic attachment forming. The man who notices this and holds her gaze, not aggressively, not with commentary, just with acknowledgement, just with a look that says, "I see you," is the man who makes the moment mean something. The man who misses it entirely, who is focused elsewhere when those eyes come looking, is the man who doesn't even know what he's lost. Pay attention to where her eyes go in a room full of people. The answer is usually more honest than anything she would ever say. She doesn't look for you in a crowded room because you're easy to find. She looks because finding you matters. The seventh and final sign is the most intimate one. It's the sign of remaining. She hasn't left. That's it. That's the sign. I know that sounds too simple, but think about what remaining actually requires. If she were indifferent to you, leaving would cost her nothing. Walking away from someone who doesn't matter is effortless. You don't agonize over it. You don't maintain any contact at all. You don't remember small details or look for someone in a room or tell them things you don't tell others. You simply stop appearing in their story. She hasn't done that. She is still in the story. Maybe not at the chapter she was before. Maybe things are more complicated than they were, more uncertain, more tender. But she is still there. And her remaining is not passive. Remaining is a choice made again and again, every day she doesn't choose to leave. This isn't wishful thinking. This is behavioral economics applied to human relationship. The path of least resistance for someone who feels nothing is disappearance. She has not disappeared. She has remained. That remaining is data. Marcus, 64, spent 11 months convinced he had ruined things with a woman he had known for 3 years. He had pulled back at a critical moment. Fear, timing, the usual reasons, and she had matched his withdrawal. They existed in a strange in-between place, not together, not gone, not over. He called it a waiting room. He was wrong about what kind of waiting room it was. He thought he was waiting to be officially rejected. She was waiting for him to stop waiting and move. The instruction for the sign of remaining is the simplest and the hardest thing in this list. Stop treating her presence as an accident. Stop treating the fact that she's still there as a default rather than a decision. Treat it as what it is, information, and let that information give you the courage to move. She is still here. Act accordingly. Now let me bring all of this together, because the 7 signs we've covered today are not random behaviors. They're a coherent language, the maintenance signal, the memory mirror, the protective redirect, selective availability, the emotional disclosure ladder, the witness effect, the sign of remaining. Each one on its own is a whisper. Multiple together is something much louder. And if you've been hearing some version of these from someone you believe you've lost, I want you to hear this clearly. You have not lost her. You may have lost clarity. You may have lost timing. You may have gotten inside your own head in ways that cost you momentum. But a woman who is showing you these signs has not walked away from you. She is waiting, not infinitely, not forever, but genuinely, for you to see what she has been showing you and respond to it. The most dangerous thing you can do right now is nothing. Not because inaction is passive. Inaction, in this context, is a message. It says, I don't see it, or I don't want it, or I'm not someone who moves when something matters. And you are not that man. You would not still be thinking about her if you were that man. This is not a situation that requires a grand gesture or a perfect speech. It requires presence. It requires the courage to acknowledge what's been between you without demanding a verdict before you've made your move. It requires one honest, warm, direct step, and then paying attention to where she goes next. The men who act on what they see, who trust what the signals are telling them rather than the fear story they've been telling themselves. Those are the men who find out they weren't as lost as they thought. Those are the men who sit across from her 2 years from now and remember the night they almost didn't move. Don't be the man who almost moved. I want to leave you with a question, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. Do you think men are getting better or worse at reading these signals today? I have my own opinion, but I want to hear yours. The comments on this video are always some of the most honest conversations I see anywhere. Don't hold back. And if this resonated, if something in those 7 signs landed, like this video. Not for the algorithm. As a signal to yourself that you're done guessing and ready to see clearly. I'll see you in the next one.